When we think about the rise of the Third Reich, we usually picture a political storm, right? But what if I told you it was also a performance, a very carefully staged show? The Nazis didn't just grab power. No, they built this incredible myth, this idea that their victory was already written in the stars. They literally manufactured a destiny, and they did it by turning prophecy into a weapon.
And behind every great performer, there's always a stage manager, right? For Hitler, one of the first guys pulling the strings was Dietrich Eckart. He was part of this occult-obsessed group called the Thule Society. Eckart looked at young Hitler and saw, well, raw potential. He decided he was going to be the one to shape him. And these words, supposedly spoken as he was dying, they're just chilling. It shows that the Führer's so-called destined rise was anything but.
So, let's look at the first act of this whole thing. It wasn't really about politics at first, it was pure showmanship. And the star of this early show? A super charismatic con man, a guy who called himself a psychic. And he's the one who would teach Hitler how to own a stage, and, eventually, an entire nation.
This guy's name was Erich Jan Hanussen, and he was a total master of illusion. He saw Hitler speak and thought, wow, this guy is not great. So he basically took him under his wing. Hanussen taught him the real art of performance, how to stand tall, how to take his voice from a quiet whisper to a booming roar. And famously, he taught him this trick for how to deal with his nerves, how to turn a shaky, trembling hand into a powerful, defiant fist. This was way more than just public speaking lessons. This was about building a whole new persona from the ground up. But Hanussen's most powerful tool? It was prophecy. Get this, in February 1933, he goes out in public and predicts that a great house in Berlin is going to burn down. Just 5 days later, the Reichstag building is on fire. For Hitler, this was pure political gold. It let him declare a state of emergency and basically grab all the power. But Hanussen's vision? It was pretty obvious he had inside information. And you know what happens to people with that kind of info? 3 weeks later, he turns up dead. A loose end, tied up for good. Okay, so with Hanussen out of the picture, the whole one-man show era was over. The job of manufacturing destiny got a serious upgrade. It was handed over to the propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, and he was going to take prophecy from a simple stage trick and turn it into an industrial-scale weapon of war. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. The Nazis weren't just cherry-picking old prophecies that kind of fit what they wanted to say. Oh no, they were creating them. This is what we mean by weaponized prophecy. Goebbels set up a whole department whose only job was to take old texts, rewrite them, and forge them into a psychological weapon. The goal? Demoralize their enemies and convince the German people that their victory was absolutely fated. So, for example, Goebbels' ministry hired a bunch of scholars to dig through the writings of Nostradamus. They'd find these really vague, open-ended lines, something like, "A child shall be born from poor people." And then they'd completely forge new versions that pointed, surprise, surprise, directly to Adolf Hitler. What was once totally ambiguous suddenly became a very specific ancient prediction of a Nazi victory. And the scale of this whole operation, it was just staggering. We're talking millions. They printed millions of these forged pamphlets, all designed to look like the real ancient deal. And this stuff basically became ammunition in a kind of psychological blitzkrieg. Nazi planes would fly over France and England and just drop thousands and thousands of them. It was literally a war fought not with bombs, but with paper, all designed to make the Allies feel like resistance was completely pointless. But here's where the story takes a really ironic twist. This propaganda machine they built was so good, so effective, that it actually ended up fooling one of their own top leaders. And the consequences? They were disastrous. So it raises a really important question, doesn't it? What happens when leaders actually start believing their own hype, their own propaganda? When that line between the myth they've created and reality starts to get blurry for the people in charge, well, the whole system becomes incredibly unstable. And the story of Rudolf Hess is a perfect and, frankly, completely bizarre example of this. So you've got Rudolf Hess, Hitler's number 2 guy, his deputy Führer, and he was a true believer. He was super into astrology, which, was something his own party was promoting. So when his personal astrologer told him that the planets were perfectly aligned for peace talks with Britain, he bought it, hook, line, and sinker. In May of 1941, totally convinced he was on a mission from the cosmos, Hess hops in a plane, flies a solo mission to Scotland, parachutes into some random field, and demands to speak with Churchill. You can't make this stuff up.
The British, of course, thought he was completely insane, and when word got back to Hitler, He was beyond furious. Hess's little adventure completely exposed the fact that the Nazi leadership relied on the exact same mysticism they were pushing as propaganda. It was a huge embarrassment. So, to save face, Hitler ordered this ruthless purge they called Action Hess. More than 600 astrologers, fortune-tellers, mystics, the very people who had helped them build this myth, were arrested all across Germany. The tools they had used to build their propaganda machine had suddenly become way too dangerous to even exist.
So when you look back at this whole chain of events, it goes from a simple stage performance to an industrial-scale factory of belief, and then it just implodes. It really reveals a powerful lesson about the nature of power itself.
Yeah, this arc really tells the whole story, doesn't it? You start with a high-impact performance of just one guy, a showman. Then it gets industrialized, creating mass belief on a scale that's hard to even imagine. But in the end, it all leads to self-destruction. All because a key leader started, consuming his own product, and that caused the entire system to just collapse in on itself. When you get right down to it, the Nazis were able to commit such unthinkable crimes because they convinced a whole nation that their actions were somehow predetermined, that it was all just a matter of destiny. The real danger was never about the stars or some dusty old texts. It was about the cold, cynical manipulation of what people believe, all for political control. In this history, it really forces us to ask a tough question. If a nation's destiny can be completely manufactured and then sold to its people, what kind of narratives are we being sold today? The tools have changed for sure. We've gone from forged pamphlets to social media feeds. But the basic strategy of manufacturing a story to shape what the public believes, that's still very much with us. It's a powerful reminder that the most important prophecy of all is the one we choose to write for ourselves. And we do that by questioning the stories we're told and always asking who really benefits when we believe them.